So I like to keep my class as hands-on as possible. And one of the things I like to do at the end of the school year when things start warming up is to take kids outside as much as they can. And usually when, I might switch to the mic. Sorry in the back, my bad. And usually whenever I have an outdoor class, I try to do my best to like case the area where they're working to make sure there's no allergic reactions or anything. And so there was one day where I took a class outside and the kid found a feather that must have been from a sandhill crane, like it absolutely had to be. There was another day where a kid found a fossil and a bunch of shells that were all kind of conglomerated together. And every time I take kids outside, there's always a lot of discoveries they have that they couldn't have had in the objective or the plan of the lesson. And they just are a lot more innovative and a lot more interested. So I try to go outside as much as I can at the end of the year. This day, I was taking them on a lesson where they were going to do leaf rubbings. So they were going to pick leaves, and then they were going to take their pencil and put it under a paper and rub it, and get the texture of it there. Then they were going to have to use a chart to sort those leaves into what kind of species it was. And so they were looking at speciation and taxonomy and cladograms and all kinds of more rigorous science concepts, but they didn't really realize it until the very, very end. And so I went out about 6 a.m. in the morning and started looking around the area, just checking for poison ivy. For those of you that are teachers, if you've ever taken kids outside, the two biggest ruiners of anything at recess or outside activities are usually yellow jackets and then poison ivy. Yellow jackets are the worst, but poison ivy is a close second, and it's usually pretty easy to find. So I walked around and I checked everything as well as I could. And it was kind of dark outside. It was right after we sprang ahead, so it was, the sun hadn't risen yet. But I had my flashlight and I didn't see a thing, and I felt really good about it. So I teach 4 classes a day, and the first class went very, very well. The second class went very, very well. Everyone was just really excited to see the giant burdock fronds and the narrow stalks of garlic and spring onions and compare all of them to each other. And in their rubbings, they were able to use the charts that I provided them to figure out that this leaf, which looks a lot like a maple leaf, is actually a type of oak leaf, and there's a couple of differences. They also were playing with like sycamore pods, seed pods that had fallen from the previous year. They were getting all the little like fuzzies out of them. And it was just a very positive and enriching 3 classes. Then I got to my 4th class, and everything started as expected. Kids were really engaged, kids were really curious. And then I heard the dreaded words that I was hoping not to hear all day. Can anyone guess? Very, very close. Very, very close. I'm feeling itchy. And it was just one kid at first. It was just one kid. Of course in my head I'm thinking, you're just, I don't know, it's psychosomatic. You're just making this up. It's probably going to pass in a moment. Maybe a mosquito bit you. Maybe. Unlikely. First it was 1 kid, then it was 2 kids, then it was 4 kids, then it was 7. It felt like that moment in the zombie movies where you know that like everyone is turning and they're all looking at you like, and I knew I had to act fast because I was telling them out loud, just wait, it's gonna pass. But I was telling myself in my head, something is wrong. It's a beautiful day. They love being outside. There's no way they would make up an illness to go back inside and do work on paper. So something was going wrong. So I got the checklist in my head that you get when you don't get trained on how to solve this specific issue as a teacher. None of us did. You get trained in a couple of things, you cobble them together into what a responsible adult should be doing, and I look a lot like my students, except that I have a beard. And so the first thing we did, we hustled back inside, we got everyone in the classroom, and I start notifying the nurse, notifying the principal, making sure that I had all of the allergy lists in front of me, that nobody's being triggered by something outside, none of them were. And then I was lucky enough that I had last period prep. So thankfully I have a great team, great administrators, great teachers, some of whom are here at my school, and the kids were looked after, but the 6 kids, 7 kids that were itchy, we had to get them something. So I hop in my car and I drive to the pharmacy that's closest to the school, and I buy 2 big bottles of calamine lotion. And then I come back to the school and I had gotten all the parents' permission, and they start slathering the pink stuff on their hands, and they are, a little bit nervous, but they start after 5-10 minutes, feels like hours, but 5-10 minutes, they're like, okay, it's starting to go down, the hives are not there anymore, the redness is starting to fade, or it's really just turning pink because of the calamine. But I still felt really guilty. I felt like this was my fault. What did I do wrong? I didn't really sleep very well that night because I was worried I would come back the next morning and they'd have bleeding scratches from whatever they had been infected by. But I came into school the next day and all the kids were fine. They all felt great. And they didn't blame me. They didn't fault me because they were happy that they got to go outside. but I still felt like I'd done something wrong. So at the end of the day, I go back outside and I look around. And I look at all of the plants on the edge of our property. And I notice that there's still no poison ivy. I don't see any poison oak. I don't see anything that could have triggered an allergic reaction. But I did notice that every species I saw was invasive. Every single one was non-native. You had like mulberries, you had like these weird sumacs that don't really belong there, you have all these thistles and vines and things that are all from places other than Indiana. And I came to a realization that it probably wasn't anything that I could have predicted that was triggering their allergies. It was probably the land around the area where we are. There's a lot of trucks going by, there's a lot of pollen flying from the wildfires in Canada, there's so many things that are landing in the area on the edge of our school and growing in soil that our kids are not exposed to. I teach at a middle school. Does anyone here teach at middle or high school? Woo! Do your kids get recess? No. The CDC, nice, awesome, that's my wife. The CDC recommends that kids K-12 get 20 minutes of recess a day. Now it doesn't really go into a lot of detail on what that recess should look like, but most states do not have any requirement, and the states that do, they usually only require it in elementary school. So our kids in high school, they need the movement, they don't really get it. And even when they do get recess, it's usually not in nature. It's usually on one of these like factory-produced, hermetically sealed playgrounds where everything is plastic or metal, rubber, tire, if that's still allowed in some places. Maybe you have wood chips, but you know they're really treated. It's nothing that's exposing them to the things that would make them safe outdoors. And when you're teaching city slickers, and when you're a city slicker yourself, being outside for any amount of time can be really dangerous. You don't know who's allergic to bees, who's allergic to anything that's in the air, and you don't know who's going to go into anaphylactic shock, so you're scared and you keep them inside. We're scared of a lot of other things too. We're scared of testing, and we're scared of what's being required of us that's going to be like, do I really want to go outside when I can practice that math skill for another 5 minutes? Would I be wasting time? Would I be told I'm wasting time? I'm a science teacher. I don't have a test that I have to follow, but it did give me a bit of pause to take them outside until I really felt like I had enough credibility at my school. And even then, I was typically one of very few teachers that was taking older kids outside for nervousness of behavioral issues, lack of academic success, or safety issues. I only say that because I do think investing in green space is really important for schools, especially in the city. And green space is really a bit of public health. The area behind our school is an old drainage disc that's been buried into a sewer. Nobody's maintaining it. All of it is outside of our school property, so we can't maintain it. And the lawn is, for the most part, scratchy crab grass. That's pretty much it. And this is true of a lot of schools around the country, except most of them have more asphalt than grass. And as we look around, especially during the pandemic, where people were starting to actually be at home more, where they sometimes had more access to nature than they did at their schools, I really think that this shift towards green spaces and outdoor classrooms is something that we should probably push at a higher level than just individual teachers who are taking the risk. So I was thinking about it for 2-3 days at school, and I was nervous to take them outside again because I didn't know what would happen. But the kids kept asking, what are we going to do outside next time? So I decided to take them out again, and this time we did an archaeology lesson. And there was some construction going on. They were digging up a bunch of stuff, and there were all these old bricks and random other things that were out in the soil. So I asked the construction workers, hey, can I like go outside before you put everything under turf? And they're like, we don't really care. Just go do whatever and tell us when you're done. So we go out there and they dig for all these bricks, and they have to make theories about where did these come from? Was it a building? Was it a wall? What was here before the school was? And after that, they dig into a little bit of old maps or primary sources and learn that where our parking lot is for our school was actually a roadway that went through to neighborhoods and connected them that was cut off by the school and by the drainage ditch canal. And we didn't have any medical issues that time, but I'm going to continue taking my students outside, and I'm going to do it as often as I can, because I think that is what makes for healthy and also really creative thinking teams. That's the end of my story. But before I turn it over to our next speaker, I did want to just name, we only have 4 speakers tonight. We will open it up for an open mic afterwards. But one of the reasons we have less, if you've ever been to any of our storytelling events before, we usually have 6 or 8. And one of the reasons we have less this time is that a lot of the teachers I reached out to were extremely scared and nervous to share stories, more than I've ever heard in the past. I don't think that should come as a surprise to anyone in this room, but if it does, in my mind, I'm thinking about all of the policing that happens of teachers by school boards, by state legislatures, by everyone, that has happened recently that didn't happen before, and how much more scared teachers and librarians are of losing their jobs for saying the wrong thing, of being investigated, of being charged, of anything. I say that because if you are a teacher and you have a story, I hope you know that if you want to share it, there's always going to be a safe place to tell it. So thank you so much for listening. And is Nicole? Yep. Cool. I will turn it over to our next storyteller, Nicole Cooper.